Today we are talking about Baron Samedi and his nerfs. This was the third most requested video of the poll that I made recently. The second most requested video I unfortunately couldn't make because the mitigation build that I wanted to do doesn't really work anymore the same way as it did, as we can't build Luna's Mask on tanks anymore. But Samedi is still nerfed and that's worth looking into. Let's first look at the nerfs a little bit in detail. So the explanation by Hi-Res was as follows. A few nerfs were not enough to stop Baron Samedi's party. While the changes in 5.12 now have him functioning as intended and brought his overall performance down, he is still outperforming most other characters, especially in damage. In this patch, we are focused on reducing his overall damage to really let his utility be the star of his kit. And in today's video, we're gonna find out if that is actually achieved. Vivid Gaze and Wrap It Up are seeing base and scaling nerfs, while the heal from Consigned Spirit is being reduced slightly. We'll continue to watch his overall performance and playstyle in the coming patches, but this should put him in a solid spot for his ranked debut. And the first one here is Hysteria. The skull that appears to show a player is affected by Hysteria has now an offset to help players see while affected. This is more of a quality of life thing, not a direct nerf as such, making it a lot nicer for enemies to be able to see properly and aim properly while they're under the effect of this, especially with how long Hysteria lasts. Vivid Gaze, damage decrease from 80 to 280 to 60 to 240. Scaling decreased from 70% to 60%. Now initially I thought that this might finally mean that Consigned Spirits is actually the better ability to level first. Upon close inspection, that's probably still not the case, unless obviously you're in a lane where you need a lot of sustain very early on. Vivid Gaze now does 240 damage on the ability itself, and then on the second hit it does another 36. So against the archers in the back you will do a total of 276 damage. On top of that you have the scaling, which is now 60%, and then another 15% of the 60% being 9%. So we end up with 69% damage on that, on the scaling. I will not say anything else on that number. But as for the value over Consigned Spirits gets a little bit more damage at the highest rank with 290 still, but it does not have the same cooldown. The big benefit of Vivid Gaze is the 9 seconds cooldown from the start. And the benefit of Consigned Spirit is obviously that you can get a lower cooldown by leveling it down from 15 seconds to 11 seconds, but for the period of leveling that you're weaker. So technically in a Samedi v Samedi matchup, if you want to give up the first few waves and feel like you don't need that little bit of extra pressure, then you can go into Consigned Spirits, and from the point where it's maxed you will have a massive advantage over the enemy Samedi, but before that you won't. So you can kind of consider leveling Consigned Spirits against somebody who doesn't have the best clear themselves and then get a massive advantage through the extra healing that you get on top of everything else. But really that should remain a situational decision, and I think most of the time you will still level Vivid Gaze first. Consigned Spirits also gets a small nerf, but that's so small that's almost not noticeable. Decreased heal from 15% of a target's missing health to 12.5%. 2.5% difference. Obviously for a tank with a lot of HP, this can have an impact. I'm not saying it's completely unnoticeable in all situations, but most of the time it won't really matter all too much. And especially with it still being over 10% and you still having a base heal and some scaling along with it, it's really, you know, not that much of a change in the bigger picture, and it still means that he has a lot of healing for his allies in teamfights as well, which is very, very impactful. Wrap It Up is also changed slow to root to a new CC term, ramp to root. The ramp up to the root is considered a root for all CC immunity purposes, and if it is cleansed it will result in the full root not applying. So for example Cabrakan, nothing really changes, he gets his root immunity just as before. Decreased damage over time and Hysteria AoE duration from 4 seconds to 2.5 seconds to match the ramp to root effects. So basically you just have the snake wrapping around you for 2.5 seconds and then you're rooted, and that has some further impact for other guards as well. Because that means that the AoE circle for him only lasts for 2.5 seconds as well. And obviously it also lowers the damage. This causes the overall damage this ability deals to go from 80 to 336 plus 40% of your magical power to 50 to 210 plus 25% of your magical power, as you now have 5 ticks instead of 8 ticks. So effectively, this ability loses 126 base damage on its highest rank, which is quite a lot, and it also loses 15% scaling on top of that. So realistically, this ability got nerfed the most in this patch, it's lost the most damage, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily the most impactful nerf of them all. That's simply down to the fact that Vivid Gaze can be used as a clear and Wrap It Up can't. As single target damage against a god, it's very strong, but Vivid Gaze is just the one that you're going to be using more often in the wave, to poke through the wave and to generally just throw it out and see if you can hit someone at long range, because it's a little bit safer to confirm along with Consigned Spirits than Wrap It Up. Wrap It Up is really more when you're able to go all in on a target. Prior to this patch, you could often just go in on someone with Wrap It Up and then just blow them up with Consigned Spirits and Vivid Gaze. With the damage nerfs between these abilities now, that most of the time won't happen to result in a death anymore, unless you have a lot of items and a lot of other things that get you ahead of the enemy, as they will be able to survive your burst once. And that, I think, is a crucial difference in how he plays, as now you will have to play a bit more strategically when it comes to how you want to use your kit. You will find yourself using your 1 for poke more often just in between and not just waiting for the setup burst, and then maybe afterwards, after you poke down the enemy, you use to Wrap It Up and do the combo again and that way get the kill. Or you will also use your ultimate a lot. The ultimate is basically untouched here and still does a truckload of damage and is still a very strong control ability at the same time. Something that I learned recently is that you can actually use Consigned Spirits to effectively remove the slow from your ultimate as well, the self-slow, meaning you can move very quickly in your ultimate if you get the heal proc from Consigned Spirits beforehand and the target is above the Hysteria threshold. And with a speedy vacuum cleaner zooming around the team fight and pulling in whoever he gets close enough, that will still be scary. You have to keep in mind that many people think a lot of his ultimate comes down to the CC and you can kind of just block that with the Aegis. But even before that, you will often have somebody running away from you for a little bit, and in that time they get stacks of Spear of the Magus on them, they get stacks of Hysteria on them, and they still take some damage, so you can easily set up for more after the ultimate later. Samedi also has incredibly short cooldowns overall, making his kit very spammable. He works very well with cooldown reduction because then you can use all your abilities multiple times in a team fight and you will have your ultimate very frequently. And again, if you get your full combo on a target, you will probably still blow them up, including the ultimate. So a 3-2-1 ult combo is pretty safe to kill someone if they don't have their relics or something to get them out quickly. Also, it's worth keeping in mind with Samedi that he still gets 35% reduced damage during his ultimate, so even focusing him down can be quite hard. What's interesting to me is that with these changes, I think he's got more flexibility in what he does. Beforehand, it was kind of a waste not to just go into the highest amount of power possible and a lot of cooldown reduction, and that is still very valuable for him, I would say. I think especially a cooldown reduction build that includes the new Soul Reaver, which can now proc as many times as you want, it doesn't have the internal cooldown anymore, can be very devastating for the enemy and can be a very effective build that we can see a lot. But more utility focused builds could also be a possibility. As his burst isn't quite as strong anymore, you can now consider going into something more of a Apwash style build, more like what Apwash used to build, where you're looking for more tanky items, cooldown reduction items, health items, and that way are able to basically be more of a nuisance during a team fight. You won't have the mobility, so it's nice for you to have some defense anyways. You can heal yourself and teammates a lot, and that's still one of the strengths with the percentage heal especially. You have your other, well, debuffs through the 1 and the CC through the 3, and you also have an extremely frustrating ultimate no matter how it's used. So between that, Hi-Rez is maybe a bit closer to their goal of having Samedi in this kind of bruiser position. I don't think he's quite there yet. I think he's still very strong as a damage-oriented mage, and I think that especially the ultimate may have to be targeted a little bit more before it really shifts to a completely hybrid style. especially since there's still some total health damage on there and still a high flat value and still a decent scaling all combined. But at the same time, I would say we are seeing the right changes to Samedi. In his release date, Samedi was pretty ridiculous, and right now he still feels rather strong, but there are definitely counter mechanisms to him that can be used. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets further nerfs, especially surrounding the ultimate, but that's for the future. That's something we have yet to see, and we probably see Pele before that. But that concludes my video for Baron Samedi. Thank you guys very much for watching. I hope this was interesting and insightful. If you're new to the channel, click the sub button with the bell, it really helps me out. Other than that, see you for the next one tomorrow. DukeSloth, out.